This is the story of a man named Stanley.
All right, everyone. This is a very special episode of the Rumble Pack. I'm Adam, and Becca and Khaled are not here today, so we have a very special guest, the co-host of the Was It Worth It podcast, Mr. Dane. Hi, Dane. How are you?
I'm good. It's funny because my podcast, Was It Worth It, on SharcTank Media is probably less popular than your Rumble Pack features. So it almost feels silly being introduced that way. It's also worth noting that we're good friends. We're good online friends and have been for quite some time now. Used to play a lot of World of Warcraft back in our darker days. And, I'd say that's a more appropriate introduction.
Yeah, it is, but, this way we can plug, get you those listeners.
Oh, yeah, no, I understand. Of course, I appreciate it, and I'll make sure to plug you, on my next show.
All right, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Not like physically or like literally plug you like an orifice on your body, but I mean like
whoa,
your show.
Whoa. Family. Who the fuck am I kidding? It's not a family show.
I was about to say, oh my god. I mean, I know I've seen a couple episodes of your Payday Let's Plays, and I don't remember it being particularly family friendly.
As you probably have figured out from the cutscene that I'm going to put right before this little intro starts, we are going to review for you the Stanley Parable. When I was talking to Dane about what we were going to do here, since we were kind of having to throw this together last minute, he had told me that they already reviewed the Stanley Parable on Was It Worth It, and I asked him if he wanted another shot at it, and he's like, yeah, I'll take another bite at that apple.
Sure, yeah, especially because, Was It Worth It is a little bit specific in its formatting, in which we just try and break things down in an effort to say, hey, did this game have enough content or the quality of content, to actually be worth your hard-earned money, since there are a lot of games out there. And so in this case, it'll be kind of taking it from a slightly different angle, I think. And, of course, it's always nice talking to other people about games, because, everybody's got a little bit of a different dynamic with one another.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, I guess let's just go ahead and jump into it. One of the first things I immediately noticed when I started to walk through the office in the Stanley Parable is the office is impossible. It's completely spatially impossible. It makes zero sense whatsoever. Was that something
What do you mean?
Well, if you look at the way that the hallways are structured and you kind of look into the offices, you know how you can see into offices and you'll see open doors and they go to hallways, right? Mm-hmm. If you look at where those hallways are going and like the structure of them, there's at least 3 or 4 cases where that hallway runs smack dab into a hallway that you're in and nothing. Like it just completely doesn't make sense. And then on top of that, you'll have the occasional bit where the game will intentionally route you into a square hallway. And you'll just do lap after lap in this one hallway, mm-hmm. right? And then suddenly it's like, oh, hey, door. But the entire office is built that way. And I think that that's amazing because it keeps you completely off balance the entire time.
Yeah, it is really cool how it does that, how it almost seems like... I mean, I guess I don't know enough about game design and level design, but it's just really cool how, like you mentioned, you'll be turning a corner, in a hallway in the office, and you'll go on a loop a few times until it eventually actually takes you somewhere completely different. It's almost as though the game is kind of generating that or rendering that in a split second that it takes you to turn the corner that 4th time. It's interesting.
Oh, for sure. And it's like when they designed this game, it's clear that from the very beginning it was designed in such a way that you were going to replay sections over and over and over again, right?
Oh, yeah.
And as a result of that, they put a lot of thought into how can we make this interesting enough that you're not going to get really irritated by having to do the same fucking hallway for the 6th time.
Definitely, and of course, in order to help with that as well, the narrator, who we haven't gotten into yet, the fantastic narrator who's constantly narrating Stanley's journey, or your journey, if you will, he'll actually say different things when you go through the exact same portions of the game, so that way, even what you're hearing doesn't get old.
Yes, and it's also worth noting that these narrations differ very subtly. Like, you'll hear one, and then you'll hear it again, but no, wait, you didn't hear it again. It was just ever so slightly different. And
oh yeah, for sure. And sometimes they even build up to like more, bigger overarching jokes.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And the narrator is just I'm trying to find his name. I believe it was Kevin Brighton, I think. Let's just look. I'm on my phone. At least I was nice enough to use my phone instead of clack my keyboard.
Sure. I think I'll have that here for just... Let's see. Yeah, Kevin Brighting. There you go.
Kevin
That's
Brighting.
Kevin with an A.
Yeah, he is just fantastic. I mean, correct me, the Stanley Parable was originally a mod for the Source Engine, right? And then it ended up on Greenlight.
For Half-Life 2.
Yeah, and then it ended up on Greenlight, and they made a whole game out of it. But I remember when the Stanley Parable mod first came out, it was also around the same time as Bastion. And I remember people just going absolutely ape about how fantastic the narration was in both Bastion and the Stanley Parable. And they were very similar in a sense where the Stanley Parable narrator, he tells you what to do, but he also reacts to what you're doing, right? Whereas Bastion is sort of entirely reactive to what you are doing in the game, and it's really interesting to sort of see both sides of that coin played kind of together, where yes, if you do something different in Bastion, the narrator reacts differently, but there's no real acknowledgement of it. Whereas in the Stanley Parable, it's all very sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You go through the right door instead of the left door, and he lets you know, like, hey, you dummy, you should have gone through the right door.
Yeah, well, the difference, too, between Bastion's narration and Stanley Parable's narration is that while Bastion's is also a little bit different from traditional narration, it's still fairly standard, I mean, there's not too much in the way of fourth wall breaking. It doesn't reference itself too much. It does, but it doesn't. It doesn't really take you out of it. It doesn't make you stop what you're doing and laugh, because really, the narration is still kind of driving you towards the overall goal of the game. Whereas the Stanley Parable takes it a step further, and, I mean, just in terms of how self-referential it is, and how it's constantly making you stop and think about the way the game is designed, but also about the way games in general are designed. I mean, there's so much going on there.
Oh yeah, 100%. And you sort of like, I remember thinking at one point while playing it that if the Stanley Parable referenced itself anymore, it would become like just this black hole of self-reference, and we would just be left with nothing. It would just eat all of the other games into it.
Sure.
And really, it kind of, you really, there is an ending, and I mean, as far as discussion of the endings go, we're not going to spoil all of them, but we are going to spoil some of them because they're fucking brilliant.
Yeah, and honestly, they really can't be fully spoiled by any one person's description of them. It's the sort of thing where you have to experience it to really experience it.
Yeah, and it should be added, there's like 8 or 9 endings, and I actually went...
even more, if you can count some of the little things that can be considered endings.
I went ahead and I actually did look up a flowchart. You had suggested that, so I could experience as many of them as possible. And I experienced all of them, as per this flowchart, I experienced all of them but one. And that's the one that's just absolutely insane. We'll talk about that in a second. But what I was talking about here...
Yeah, I had to watch that one on YouTube.
I haven't actually watched it yet. What I was talking about here, where it's like, oh, it's going to eat all of the other games, is there is an ending where it's just like, hey, you don't like our game? Well, fuck you, and here's other games that you can play. And it drops you into Minecraft, and it's amazing. It's perfect. And there's even this sort of wink, the entire game, the Stanley Parable, is like, hey, choices, video games, except not really, because no matter how many choices a game appears to give you, you're still following a predetermined story. All roads still lead to Rome, right? Which is one of the things that I said when Mass Effect 3 came out. I'm sure you remember that conversation where it's like, of course Mass Effect 3 comes down to a 3-choice ending. It can't. be anything else, right? Because that's just the nature of the medium. Until we have like these crazy like Skynet style computers where they really can be reactive to everything, that's all it's ever going to be. But the Stanley Parable kind of acknowledges that this kind of open-ended choice does actually exist. It's called Minecraft. You know, where it's just like, hey, sandbox, do whatever you want, you make your own endgame. And it even says, like, that's a little too open-ended for me, you know?
Right. Yeah, and of course the argument there that could be made is that Minecraft doesn't really have a story that it's trying to get you to the end of, whereas the Stanley Parable is all about the story, the narrator's story. But, you know, they're different types of games, and of course that's the point that it was trying to make, is that, you know, Minecraft is the perfect example of something that is everything and nothing, you know, like in terms of a video game.
Yeah. And the sort of, as far as like the story of Minecraft goes, I think that the entire point of it being open-ended, like, hey, this is too open-ended for me, is that you are the one who defines your story in Minecraft. And in a sense, that means that it's the only truly player-driven story that there is. I mean, you choose to build a castle, you're going to build a castle. You know, no one else is going to build that same castle. That is your story. And the irony, of course, is to get there, you have to just have no story at all to have a truly player-driven story.
Sure.
So I love
putting that power into the hands of the player is awesome, because not everybody even realizes that they might have what it takes to create something unique and something that is theirs. So games like Minecraft pretty much make that easy for everybody to be able to do.
Oh, and yes, absolutely. Then, of course, after Minecraft, it dumps you into Portal 2, which was just... That was a great little, again, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And what's interesting, though, is when you consider that Portal 2 is kind of the antithesis of Minecraft. It's very linear. Like, Portal 2 is one of those games where, in the details, it's extremely open-ended, right? There's 101 ways you can place this portal to solve this puzzle, right?
Sure.
But the overall arching story is it's incredibly linear, and it's only ever going to lead to one direction. And in a sense, I kind of view that as it's the Stanley Parable on steroids, if you really think about it for a second. Because, like, no, Gladys isn't saying go through the right door or the left door, right? But Gladys is dropping you into a puzzle that has 1,000 different solutions, but no matter how many different ways you solve that puzzle, it still leads to the same conclusion, which is pretty much the Stanley Parable, except it's, you know, not one conclusion, it's, you know, 8 or 9. But you're still always going to get there, no matter what.
Sure.
So that was great. I love the fact that the achievement system is just bonkers. They have an achievement for turning on achievements, which is great. And then, of course...
The achievements are fantastic.
Right, and then, of course, click 5 times on door 430, right? And you click 5 times on door 40. It's like, that's not good enough. Click 20 times.
The reason why it does that, too, is because the only way you would know that you will get an achievement for clicking 5 times on door 430 is to check the achievements beforehand. You look at the available achievements, what can I shoot for? And there's one that just says, hey, go click on door 430 5 times. So you go into the game, and of course you do that, and the narrator is like, oh, so you're trying to get this easy little achievement, are you? I'm not going to make it so easy for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that that's hilarious and really clever.
Right, and I mean, it kind of hits on the head of, like, that is the entirety of, that's the Stanley Parable in a nutshell. It's like, hey, let's make this really sort of deep and profound statement on choice in video games, but at the same time, let's just throw in a bunch of little jokey bits about how funny video games really are if you stop and consider it. Like, no one's... In real life, you never get an achievement for trying to open the same door 5 times, except maybe someone be like, hey, dumbass, it's locked. It was locked the first 4 times. What the fuck are you doing? Right?
Right.
But in every
the
video
achievement
game...
you get is people think you're weird.
Right. And in every video game in the world, there's always at least that one achievement where it's like, wake up. You know, the game starts with you in bed. Like,
totally. It's like start the game.
yeah,
5 achievement points. Like, what? Really?
exactly.
Yeah, there's another one in Stanley Parable, because basically they disabled the ability to jump because there's no reason to jump. It's not an action game. It's not a platformer by any, in any way, shape, or form. So they took away the ability to jump. But in first-person games, which this game is, it's a first-person exploration game, everybody knows that you press spacebar to jump when you play a first-person game, or at least, it's hardwired. So when you press spacebar to try and jump and your character doesn't jump, you get the achievement, you can't jump.
Oh, but the beauty of that is you don't just get it the first time, right? You get it after trying, like, several times to jump.
That's right. Because as if the first time wasn't good enough to tell you, oh, hey, I guess spacebar doesn't make me jump in this game. It's just... you just keep mashing it.
Yeah, and in my case, like, I tried to jump like a couple of times right at the beginning, and of course it didn't work. And then I kind of just left it, right? But then when I finally got to that Minecraft ending, right, where it puts you in Minecraft and there were things blocking your way, right? I was like, well, in Minecraft, you can jump over one high blocks. Let's see if we can jump. And that's when I finally got it, when I was trying to jump over these one blocks. Sense. Yeah.
See, I'm way dumber than you are. I got it immediately. Like, when I first started the game, I was like, can I jump? No. Are you sure? No? Maybe? No? And I know we're giving away a lot of these achievements, but I just want to talk about one more that I love. It's go outside.
Yes.
Don't play the Stanley Parable for 5 years.
Absolutely. That's probably the longest achievement ever in any video game, period.
Sure. It's good stuff.
Alright, I got one more. It's unachievable as an achievement. And that's it. It's just like, you can't get this achievement. It's not possible. And
oh, man.
I wonder, you see, everything about this game is so, like, jokey and self-referential. There has to be a way to get that achievement. There just is no other way. They wouldn't have done it.
Maybe. It seems weird that it wouldn't even be, like, you'd think it would be in some sort of agreement for people who get games on Steam that they can't have an achievement that is unachievable. That almost just seems like it would be against the rules.
Well, I know for a fact such an agreement exists on the Xbox 360. You have to have achievements, and they all must be achievable. You must be able to get them. So as far as Steam goes, Valve is very much more like, do what you will, right? So it wouldn't surprise me if it's actually unachievable, but I just don't think... I think it would kind of defeat the joke for it to actually be unachievable, Like, so I don't know. We'll see. Yeah. I'll have to look into that after this. The different ways it kept circling you back to these sort of major ideas, right, that are within the game, like the monitor room. We're not going to call it what it actually is. We're going to call it the monitor room, right?
Sure.
It really did a good job of, like, it'll circle you there in one ending and then be like, oh, very Wizard of Oz in a sense, like, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, right? And it does that, like, for 4 or 5 of the different endings, you end up at one point in this room. And for me, I didn't actually follow... I'm sure a lot of people did, like, follow the quote-unquote intended path.
The first time through, you mean?
The first time through, right? I didn't do that. I actually did the exact opposite.
I didn't either. Same here. And sorry to derail it just a little bit, but I want to add that that's actually a really cool study you can make, is to see, kind of separate the people who did it the way the game was telling them to do it and the people who didn't their first times playing. It's really interesting. And talking to my friend, my co-host of my show, it was the same, or it was different with me and him. He actually did it the first time, and I didn't, whereas it seems like you and I both didn't. So I wonder what that says about us.
Well, I actually have this theory that, one of my favorite games is BioShock. You know this. We've talked about my love of BioShock. Ever since BioShock, I can't trust narrators. Or people who tell you to do things in games.
Sure.
Because I used to, and then Atlas happened. And now I can't do it. So it's like, hey, do this. It's like, you know what? I know where this goes. This goes to me beating someone to death with a golf club. I've played this game. But, you know, if you don't follow it through and you don't know what that room is, right? It's brilliant. It leads you there so many times just to be like, hey, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, right? And then when you finally get there by following the quote-unquote intended path, it's like, oh, this room is just a huge, like, encapsulation of the point of this game. You know? Mm-hmm. Like, the mind control is this idea of listen to the narrator, do what the narrator says, and everything will be okay. When in 99.9% of games, that's not true. But in the Stanley Parable, it actually happens to be true. And I love that. It's a good little inversion of the norm.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I guess the last thing I want to touch on, personally, and, you know, if you have anything else after this, please feel free, is the length. The Stanley Parable is a short game. It took about 2 hours for me to hit every ending except for the one ridiculous one, which we're not even going to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that the game... you're not even really expected to do it, but let's just say it takes a lot of hours and a lot of patience, and it's not something very many people on this planet will ever accomplish.
Oh, yeah, and it's the most irritating thing in the world. The sound of that button and that baby.
You'll if you have played this game before and you're listening now, if you've played this game before, you probably know exactly what it is. You can actually go on YouTube and, you know, actually watch this particular thing and watch the ending. And if you haven't played before and you do plan on playing it after listening to this, you'll probably know exactly what we're talking about when you get to that point. Yeah.
You know, it's a short game, and a lot of people... I don't know if anyone's... I sequestered myself from it because I didn't want to ruin it for myself. So I don't know if anyone's complained about it being short, but I could see people complaining about it being short. And those people are fucking stupid. And the reason they're fucking stupid is for games like The Stanley Parable and Gone Home, where you have this game that's completely devoid of action, right? Literally nothing interesting happens if you really just break it down. You take the humor out of the Stanley Parable, it's the most boring fucking thing on the planet, right? They understand that they have a very limited time to take your attention, right? And the worst thing that a game like the Stanley Parable or a game like Gone Home could do is overstay its welcome. Because we've all had those games where you've played it, they're full of action, they're fun, but they overstay their welcome. And you just get to this point where you're like, God, can I be fucking done already?
Right. Yeah, I would say that sort of parallels with videos, too. I remember hearing about this, and it's not really like a hard rule, but just a kind of a general rule that some people who made some things that I liked watching, their kind of general rule was they tried not to make their YouTube videos any longer than 4 minutes, because they found that if they were longer than 4 minutes, even if there was some good content in the video, people wouldn't watch it from beginning to end, essentially. And, you know, so when it comes to anything, like, really there's a point where you can definitely, like you said, overstay your welcome, and it's not good to do that.
Yeah, and I think that for these sort of, I've heard Gone Home referred to as an empathy game. Stanley Parable is not an empathy game, but that sort of class of games that doesn't rely on action, that it sort of relies on tension and drama or comedy, it's worse if they overstay their welcome, because there's nothing really to hold your attention. And I think
if the gameplay itself can't be classified on its own as particularly exciting or action-packed.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, the length isn't an issue. My personal feeling is a game should be exactly as long as it needs to be. And in my opinion, the Stanley Parable is exactly as long as it needs to be. Would you say that's fair?
I would say that's fair, and it's interesting because I don't know if we touched on the length of the game when I reviewed it, for was it worth it. I mean, it may have been a slight thing where we said, just so you know, it's kind of short, but other than that, everything in the package that you get is awesome, so it's okay. I'd be surprised if we didn't say something like that, but I don't really remember. But what I'm getting at is that of all the games that I have played for that show, I think Stanley Parable is the only one at that length where we didn't say that it wasn't worth it. Most of the other games, it's like, even if they were kind of fun, if they were $15 or more and still only had 1 to 2 hours of content, it was just way too hard of a sell to say that they were worth it. But with Stanley Parable, there's so much more going on there that it was a non-issue that it was that short in length, because that was exactly how long it needed to be.
Well, I guess you kind of already spoiled the next question I was going to ask, which is, was it worth it? And I tend to agree.
Yeah, it was definitely worth it for both of us.
Yeah, $15, I'd say yes. I mean, I can see why some people would feel that it's a little bit much. Like, I have a friend named Peter who never pays full price for a game, and he's like, there's no way that game's worth more than $5. I disagree. Peter is wrong. It's worth $15. And I will also say this. If EA released this game at $15, I tell them to go fuck themselves. I tend to be a lot more forgiving of indie developers, especially on length, because they're doing interesting things. And that's what the Stanley Parable is. It's interesting.
Definitely. It's one of a kind. Absolutely one of a kind. And for something like that, even at its length, for $15 for something completely and utterly one of a kind, and, just intelligent and hilarious. I mean, the narrator alone, the quality of that voice work, I'm sure that their budget, even, a lot of that must have gone into that, level of quality in the voice work.
Oh, for sure.
So, yeah, I think that it's a good price, and it's definitely worth the money, among everything else.
All right. Well, Dane, thank you. This has been fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to be here.
Go ahead and let everyone know about Was It Worth It? Tell them when it releases. Tell them where they can get it.
Yeah, we do Was It Worth It once a week on Fridays. Usually Friday morning is when it becomes available. You can find it on SharcTank.com. That's shark with a C, not a K.
All right, and I'm Adam. I'm the Rumble Pack. You're watching this on YouTube, presumably. Thanks for watching, and let us know if you want us to do more of these reviews. And Dane, will you come back next time?
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. If you ask me to come back, I would be here.
Well, I'll definitely ask you to come back. So thanks for watching, guys. Later.
Thanks, guys. See ya.